1, we just talked about simplifying these square roots with negatives, and that's where we boot out an I and it went all good. Example 2 was really the same thing, but just multiplying. We did see a couple like example C, just so that if you guys see that on the SAT, you're not like, oh my gosh, what the heck is that? So today, all I'm doing is example 3. This is really the reason why we're using this, these complex numbers, is because eventually we want to solve for x. I have, in the lovely Mrs. Hopkins way, a typo, because of course I do. Will you guys make this last negative 35 into negative 37, please? Has no decimals. So today, remember when we're working with quadratics, we're working with parabolas. Quadratics is the thing where it's an x squared. So this is a specific form of a quadratic where it doesn't have like a b term, right? There's no bx number. It's just an x squared and then a number. And so actually, if you wanted to solve for x, you can use square roots to do that. So to undo a square, we take a square root. But before we can take a square root, we have to get the thing being squared by itself first. So this thing needs to be by itself. So how do I move the 81 over here? Subtract it. So just subtract 81 from both sides. And in the past, in previous classes, when we got to this stage, we would say, oh, you're done because you can't take a square root of a negative number, right? Because you have done this before. But now we can take a square root of a negative number. So we're going to take a square root on both sides. Does anyone remember, what do I have to add when I take a square root of both sides? You guys remember? A plus or minus. I was hoping somebody would remember. Yeah, as soon as you take that square root, make sure you add a plus or minus. All right, I'm writing some extra steps here. Hopefully you could just jump right to the answer. But we have x equals plus or minus square root of negative 81. I'm going to write some extra steps. Maybe you can jump right to the final answer, but I'm going to kick out an I. And I'll have the square root of positive 81. And then if we think about our perfect squares, which perfect square divides 81? 9, because 81 actually is a perfect square, right? So there's our pair. One goes away, so the other one can escape from jail, and we have plus or minus 9i. Pretty nifty. What do we think? Doable, yes? Doable. Okay. Let's look at part B. I need to get this by itself first, this x squared. What should I move first, the 2 or the negative 5? The negative 5. You could move the 2 first, but remember, if you want to move the 2, you'd need to divide, divide, divide. Let's just divide once, so let's move the negative 5 first. We'll move it by adding 5 to both sides. So we have 2x squared equals negative 30. Now I can get rid of that 2 by dividing and dividing. So I have x squared equals negative 15. Am I good to take my square root on both sides? Yeah. Okay, so square root. I need to remember my plus or minus at this next step. So here's where I add my plus or minus. And I'm again writing extra steps. If you want to kick out the I as soon as you see it, go for it. Right? Instead of that negative, we learned yesterday, we can just put an I out here. Does anyone know, does the square root of 15 simplify? No, because it breaks into a 3 and a 5, right? And those are both prime, and there's no actual pair there. So this is fully simplified. So we have x equals plus or minus I times the square root of 15. We're good. All right, this would have been really bad if I'd left it as a negative 35. We would have had fractions, and who wants to do that? So what should I move first? I want to get the x squared by itself. I'm going to move the 8. How do I move it? Subtract. All right. And I'm pretty sure negative 37 made this nicer. Negative 37 minus 8, yes, was negative 45. So I have 9 squared equals negative 45. We'll get there eventually. How do I move that 9? Divide. Just making sure y'all still awake. So we got this. All right, so then I have x squared equals negative 45 divided by 9, negative 5, right? I'm good to take square root of both sides. Man, I give you easy ones on the notes. We didn't even have to simplify any of our roots. So I need x equals plus or minus, and I'll just jump to the answer. It would be I times the square root of 5, positive 5 this time. What do we think? Super easy, right? Okay. I'm not going to go on.